Thank you so much for joining A Shark's Perspective, the podcast with subject matter experts in marketing. With thousands of colleges and universities across the country, marketing online degree programs is very competitive, and being an entrepreneur behind one of the companies competing in that space has many challenges. Grant Aldrich is the CEO and founder of OnlineDegree.com and a subject matter expert in online education as well as the entrepreneurial spirit. And on this episode, we'll speak about successful marketing techniques in higher education, as well as understanding how to be your own boss. So let's tune in to an education entrepreneur with a learned shark on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Grant, thank you so much for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective. If you would please tell us a little bit about your background and your career thus far.
Yeah, thank you, Kenneth. I've been a startup entrepreneur for my entire career. So for the last 15 years, right when I graduated from college, I jumped right into a startup and I've been hooked ever since. I've been lucky in that I've been fortunate enough to exit two of my prior startups to a publicly traded company. And now after taking a little bit of time off, after spending time at that company, I really wanted to focus on something that I was going to care about. At this point in my career, something that I would be excited to get up every morning to do. Yeah, and my most recent startup is onlinedegree.com.
Mhm.
So I decided I wanted to go into education. It's something I've been very passionate about my whole life. And to give you the quick synopsis is we're helping everybody get their freshman year of college for free.
So not all of your background's been in higher ed, and now you're an entrepreneur. What in the world made you want to be part of this market? What was it? I mean, I get that you were passionate about it, but what drove that passion for higher ed and inspired you to pretty much go all in on this?
You're right. I have no experience in higher ed whatsoever, which is a daunting task. So I'm an avid reader, and over the
Yeah.
course of the last 2 years, every night I've essentially been able to the stack of books on my desk is just growing and growing because I haven't been able to get to them. Every night I'm learning and reading about just this industry to get caught
Mm-hmm.
up. And what really drove me was that I grew up in a family of educators. So my parents, their friends. I mean, it was common dinner table talk. And what happens is in that case, you get to see all of the stories and how important education is. So it was really important to me. But then in addition to that, when I graduated with college, I had an huge amount of student debt. And it was a crippling amount for years until I finally paid it off in my late 20s. And it just left an indelible mark on me ever since.
So, I graduated from the 13th grade, so that's really my extent of learning. But no, my stacks of books to get caught up with, something I work on every day. So, where do you see the market today in higher education? It's obviously changed so much over the last decade. I know we've got some similar friends in the space who can tell you many tales of schools closing because they can't, keep up with the pace. The fees are going up. Online degree programs are exploding in accessibility, and it's really become a more competitive market even than before. When you take a look at the marketplace, what are you seeing out there?
Well, you're absolutely right. The most people don't realize that there are thousands of institutions, four-year institutions in the United States, right? If you were to ask someone on the street, maybe they would say a few hundred. Really, there's thousands, and you could think about how competitive that is. And sadly, I think that higher ed as a whole is in a very precarious position. Enrollments overall have been stagnant or are declining in recent years. And what's curious about this is that despite all of the demand for people to go back to school, they're no longer taking those first steps towards college. And this is concerning given that, we've got huge macro trends for working adults to go back to school and learn new skills. We've got globalization, jobs have been moving overseas, robot automation, which is quickly approaching. From everything I'm reading, in the transportation industry alone, we're going to see 3 million jobs wiped out with robot cars. It's happening. We have a modernizing economy as well. So a lot of new skills are taking place that people have to keep up. So many people are in industries or jobs where they're unsatisfied or have no real prospects for growth, and ultimately they're not choosing higher ed because, and I think the real reason is that, like any large institution, they've been very slow to change and meet the needs of working adults. And I think the reason that is that working adults are a completely different beast, and the reality is they're busy. So if you understand the working adult, your real customer, you have to appreciate who that person is, and they're busy. They have jobs, they have families, meaning they can't drive to class 2 times a day for a course or be on a strict class schedule over 4 years. They need to finish more quickly because of their time, because they need to get back out there to start earning. And cost is a big issue as well, to your point. So we all know how insane student debt has become, and costs are skyrocketing. And an adult can't look at those costs, and they can't amortize the cost of a degree over 40 years like someone could in their 20s. They need it to make financial sense with a strict ROI calculation on how it'll improve their lives over this amount of time. And so finally, I think that the process to apply and get started with college is just a painful mess. I mean, imagine going back to school. You're an adult, you're busy, you have to dig up transcripts from 20 years ago, take entrance exams, wait for fall or spring. I mean, I'm amazed that anybody ever actually goes through the process.
Hmm.
So it's hurdles like these that I think are the one preventing anyone from taking that activation energy to change their daily routine and go back to school.
So Grant, I mean, obviously we've got a lot of non-traditional students who need to go back. That number's got to exceed the number of college-ready kids coming out of high school today.
You're right. So, before where a high school, college bound students right out of high school would have probably been the fastest growing segment, the bread and butter for every institution. Yeah, those numbers have changed because I believe, and I'm going to give some rough numbers here, but I believe enrollments are about 5 million a year for students who are coming in and enrolling at that level, maybe a little less. But the reality is that there are let's say as of today, over 25 million, it's estimated, adults who would be interested in going back to school and getting started. So, those numbers, and that of course is constantly shifting and growing because of the changing job landscape. So I think and by the way, adults are also the fastest growing segment, the segment that they want to attract in higher ed today.
Yet you could get some confusing signals out of employers whether or not they want to hire the adult who has a lot of experience who now has a degree versus the student who has no experience but just finished their degree. So that's always sort of an interesting choice as well. There are so many marketers and companies focused on driving leads to higher education institutions, trying to attract these different students. I know over my career, I've worked with well over 50 colleges and universities over the years, and it seems like a majority of the conversations were always built around lead generation in some form or fashion. And there's a ton of conferences out there, especially on finding and attracting new students. So when you take a look at that part of the landscape, how does a program, like yours, and there are other programs similar out there, but how are programs like yours geared towards helping those kinds of marketing departments solve some enrollment problems?
It's a great point, and you're right. I mean, higher education is probably one of the most mature lead generation industries out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, people who really understand that they are in business, they need to attract students. They've got great intake, so that is a neat thing. But ultimately, I think the way that we're different is that onlinedegree.com creates transfer students, not leads. And I think that when you're building the model of your business, you need to think about how it will benefit everybody, all of the stakeholders in an industry. So when I got started
Great point.
and I had the idea that I wanted to make it free, I knew I had to make it free because you'll never reach all of the students out there, all of the adults. You'll never overcome all those hurdles that I just talked about before unless you make it free, fast to get started, and alleviate all those concerns that they have. And also providing a lot of value, like saving a ton of money on tuition, time, all that. But I think in the other corollary of that is that we had to have a solution that benefited the universities as well, another huge stakeholder. So what we did was, it's probably obvious how we benefit the student, but there's huge value for the university as well. One of the unspoken secrets in online education is that there's a much higher dropout rate, which makes sense when you think about adults who are enrolling, right?
Sure.
Let's say they overcome all that, they've got their busy lives. If we can all appreciate something comes up and you fall behind in your
Life
classes,
gets in the way.
life gets in the way. You're not going to stay in that course. Because the debt clock is accruing and you can't afford to, you don't want to be a blemish on your record, so you drop out. And this is a huge issue for schools because obviously it's very expensive to recruit new students, and they want to be able, from a financial perspective, they want to get that money, but also because the dropout rate affects their accreditation. So the beauty of what we've created is that our platform is inherently self-vetting. If a student moves forward taking courses, they're proving so much time management. They have the intellectual capacity, their motivation, and their ability to navigate modern education platforms. So that's a huge win for universities and something that they could never duplicate with a paper application. Think about like how now you've got a modern platform to help them make better decisions and the right students and you're grooming these students. It's almost like the minor leagues for
Sure,
baseball,
sure.
where they get to foster students prior to enrolling. So I think that what we offer is highly unique in that, because we're benefiting the students, because our offering is so different than what out there, we also benefit universities as well.
So if I'm a potential marketing student and I wanted to get a degree in some form of marketing, so I could be a brand manager or SEO specialist or whatever the role is, how does an online degree program accelerate my learnings faster and then even so more cheaply? And obviously the cost of the first year within your program is free, but how does that also help the rest of the choices they make and as they start looking at years 2, 3, and 4?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that higher ed has had a case where the baby's gotten thrown out with the bathwater.
Right.
Classic case of that,
Yeah.
where most people are dispensing with higher ed because they think that, okay, I'll take a boot camp or something like that to learn these skills. But the reality is that it is still one of the top factors used for companies hiring. And so it is important. And what's neat about what our solution is for that marketing student would be that we've got some really neat like our marketing and strategy course is phenomenal. It's actually an MBA type course where we go through and we dissect all of the different top companies that we know today, Netflix, Apple, and really dive into the marketing and the strategic decisions they've made. It's a really interesting course. And so by taking that, you're not only learning for free, but you're like, just as your point, you're taking courses that could appeal towards your freshman year of free. So 25% off the cost of tuition right there. The next step is that when we work with a school to articulate, we normally work out tuition discounts at the school. So I'll give you a great example. We just finished articulation with Colorado State. When you enroll, you can finish 33% of your bachelor's degree with us for free before you enroll. But then when you enroll, they give you an additional 10% off the tuition. So we also work out these scholarships and tuition discounts on top of that. And then finally, most of the schools that we work with them because they have accelerated adult programs that are conducive to moving to speed, to lowering your cost. And so a lot of the groups that we work with, they already have a lower price and faster option and still at a very reputable school for those learners. So when you couple all those together, it's much faster and far cheaper.
So you brought up a point earlier that I will wholeheartedly agree with as far as, lead gen and where the education space is, very mature. And some of the smartest marketers that I competed against or with were in this space. You see some major universities now with 100,000 plus students, and they are well-oiled machines. You know,
Right.
content marketing was, I think, created for education in general. Great stories. You know, you've got smiling faces. It's new opportunity. It helps inspire everybody. I love the even the 25% off tag. But in a crowded space, how then are you going about marketing this program to both schools and students, and what kind of channels and strategies and tactics are you using? And I'm going to guess that podcasts are also a really good tactic. So there's one for you. But where are you seeing this for you in marketing this program as an entrepreneur?
You're right. You've got a very prolific audience, so that definitely helps. You know, I think that when you create something of real value for people, and it's not because obviously, I've been in lead gen for a long time as well, and unfortunately, there's a lot of, not that we've done this, but and then not to say any of the listeners have done this, but there's a lot of bad actors out there
Oh, a
who've done a lot
lot.
of, yeah, a lot of, you know, uh, moral kind of shady things to generate leads, and normally it involves some sort of trickery for people, and that's never sustainable. Those companies come and go. I think the real value is when you're able to create something that truly values everybody. So in the case for what we're doing for students, when we launched, because we put so much time into baking a solution that benefited everybody, it was really hard work, took 2 years to get going. Then when you come into an industry with a disruptive solution like that, people come to you. The foundation you poured in the solution itself gets you 80% of the way there with your marketing objectives. So for example, when we first launched in May of this year, soft launch, didn't even have the courses available to take yet, just to get the word out in anticipation of our July launch, we had 1,000 students
Wow.
sign up to pre-enroll with no marketing. And so from our perspective in the industry, that's phenomenal.
No
I'd never
kidding.
seen that in my career. And
That's a
you
lot
know,
of
you
that's larger than a lot of the smaller 4-year institutions that are struggling, or 1,000
you're,
students.
you're you're right. You're right. That's like that. That's probably like 70% of their
Exactly.
enrollment body. Yeah, you're right. So I was looking at the reports. I have no idea where they found us. Right, it all would be direct, and it was just from word of mouth. Because if you've got a good, powerful offering, people come to you. The same went with the universities. A lot of universities sought us out after our launch because they truly loved what we were doing. And I think that that's the big deal. And because I think you've nailed it, and you hit this on the head. The key thing for us is how do we share our solution with the world? Because when people find out about us, normally they're elated, they're excited, and that's our burden. So up until now, mostly it's just been through word of mouth, social media. We haven't been doing any big marketing buys yet, and our enrollment numbers are climbing every day.
So, Grant, if I'm thinking about, if I'm a traditional or even non-traditional student, I'm thinking about replicating your own success as an entrepreneur, and I want to go back and finish that degree so that I can maybe get a better chance at getting a loan or anything like that. What kind of advice do you give to people when they look at a college degree so that they can become that entrepreneur and help fulfill their dreams?
I have a highly romantic view of fellow entrepreneurs. These are my favorite people on the planet because it takes everything to be successful as an entrepreneur, and it says so much about someone's character to live in that space. I can speak to my own desires, and that there were two things that really drove me to being an entrepreneur. The first was freedom. To me, the ultimate life is doing what I want when I want to do it, and true freedom from expenses, from stress, and to spend every day with my family. So, given my personality, I knew that I could never obtain that, even with a high paying job that allowed me to, vacation where I wanted to go, or some nice work environment with free snacks. You're still a slave and dependent upon someone else. That's a harsh way to say it, but I think that's true. And of course, there's a corollary to that. With ultimate freedom comes ultimate responsibility. But I love that part of the adventure. And I think, and to persevere in that most challenging and dynamic environment that is business, wow. And I think that for people who are interesting, that would be a huge reason why you would want to go and do something like this. Succeed or fail, you're free in the journey and you've got real opportunity for big success. And the second motivation that I think what might compel someone to do this is that um, is the love to build and to be creative. Ever since I was a kid, my creative outlet was building things.
Hmm.
And if you work at a company, you're rarely given unfettered creative freedom to build what you want from start to finish. You're always hampered or directed by someone else's vision, someone else's budget, their limitations, etc. I mean, I think we can all relate in how many times we've worked with someone we've disagreed with on that. So I knew that the only way I could ever have a true clean palette was on my own. And I would say the same for all of those listeners out there who would look to do the same path. I think many people think about being an entrepreneur because of the money, but I actually think that may or not be the best path in the end for everyone if that's the case, because not everybody hits that multi-million dollar payday and perhaps could have made more money as an investment banker. Entrepreneurship is about the lifestyle. And I
Sure.
think that's why it's so appealing.
So, Grant, it's time now to ask you the 5 most important questions from a shark's perspective. Are you ready?
Okay, I'm ready.
You're in LA, so in the LA area. So, Kobe or LeBron?
Ooh, good question. I think I'd
Five
have
rings,
to say,
6 losses.
oh, I'm sorry.
Five rings versus 6 losses.
Yeah, if I was choosing between the two, I think I would choose Tiger Woods.
Good. So, here's a good, tough higher education question for you: UCLA or USC?
That's a good question as well. I'm going to say USC, and the reason I'm going to say that is because I like the fact that they're private and they had to be successful without taxpayer dollars.
True. Double major or master's degree?
Ooh, I'd say master's degree. I think it's far more important.
Venice Beach or the beaches of Malibu like Paradise Cove or Carbon?
I was actually at Paradise Cove recently. A family member lives around that area, and you know what? I have to say Paradise Cove. I think, I'm now that I'm a father, I'm incredibly boring, and so lacking in all kinds of fun. Not that I ever was before I was a father either, by the way. But I think that fits my style.
And the most important question, number 5: an avocado toast is not an acceptable substitute as a Californian, but biscuits or cornbread?
Biscuits, 100%.
Good. Well, Grant, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on the show today. Where can people find out more about you, the program, your expertise, and follow along for advice?
Kenneth, thank you so much for having me. This is I love listening to your show. It's a lot of actionable advice. I've enjoyed being on this side of it as well. I would say LinkedIn would be great. They can check out the new project, of course, at onlinedegree.com. But I'd love to hear from people via LinkedIn.
Perfect. Thank you, Grant, so much for speaking with us on A Shark's Perspective.
Thank you, Kenneth.
So there was my conversation with Grant Aldrich, the CEO and founder of OnlineDegree.com and a subject matter expert in online education, as well as the entrepreneurial spirit. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from my conversation with him. First, the real value is when you create something of value that benefits everybody. I love that. Second, if you've got a good, powerful offering, then people come to you. Third, if you work at a company, you're rarely given unfettered creative freedom to build what you want from start to finish. You're always hampered or directed by someone else's vision, someone else's budget, their limitations, etc. Entrepreneurs free themselves of that problem, and they know that it's the only way that they can follow their own path. Entrepreneurship is about the lifestyle as much as anything, and that's another reason that it's so appealing. Got a question? Please feel free to find me on LinkedIn or send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this show regarding another one of the many components that makes up marketing today. It's been my privilege, so let's continue to learn together and join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.